Hey, welcome back, folks. Today I want to go down the rabbit hole of looking at another cheap diesel heater. This one is the H-Calorie. I believe it's the SS2 model, and it is functionally the same as essentially all other diesel heaters that are out there on the market. Now, you see, I've held off on testing cheap diesel heaters on this channel for several years now, but this year I want to do a winter series where I share a few of these cheap diesel heaters, some of their pros and cons, and some of the things that I like and dislike about them as well. And this model is no different than the rest of the ones that I've looked at so far, in the sense that it has, for its combustion chamber, the input and the outlet on the bottom of the heater. And in this case, this one has a plastic shroud on the bottom. It also has this flexible fuel line that goes through a small cut, and I don't know if you can see that in the video. It goes through a small cut through some sheet metal right here, so I am worried that over time that small cut, if there's any vibrations, will cut through this fuel line. And my second major observation about these diesel heaters that puts me off to them is essentially this exhaust outlet is so close I can't even fit my finger under there, and that's without the actual exhaust pipe attached to it. This outlet is so close to my table that if I leave this system as packaged and turn it on and hook up the actual exhaust pipe to it, I am certainly going to burn a hole through my little wooden table here. I've got a few more gripes with this system before I move on and get into my review, which is that this system is essentially designed to be like a toolbox shape. So you can open, you have these two latches here, you can open the toolbox, and then inside you have access to your fuel tank as well as the heating element for this cheap diesel heater. And it would be understandable to expect that this thing is designed for essentially the handyman to get in, maybe make some small adjustments or small repairs. However, all of its key components are riveted to the outside case. And so that means that this toolbox case on the H-Calorie SS2 is essentially designed solely for the purpose of being able to open and add your diesel fuel into the heater. So now that that's out of the way, welcome back to Adventure Gear TV. As always, I love to test and review most of the products that are out there on the market, and in particular, those that are for camping or adventures. And in this case, H-Calorie sent me this diesel heater for a test and review. However, they have no control over the content of this video or any of my opinions or thoughts on this product. So what do you actually get when you buy a cheap diesel heater like this? Well, of course, you get the diesel heater itself, and it does have two small flaps on top, and on this side you get your Bluetooth or your Wi-Fi controller, and on the other side are the brains of this operation. And so you do have a small, and this is detachable, however it's not very long, a small module or control unit designed so that you could relocate this if you needed to and control all the features of the heater. A few of its additional components are, of course, the standard exhaust system. This is essentially the same exhaust system that you will get with any modern day cheap diesel heater that you will find online. On top of that, you get your AC wall charging cable. So most of these heaters do not come with a cable like this. This one is designed to take your 110 volt wall outlet, standard here in the United States, and put out 12 volts and 12 amps. Now, a lot of folks are skeptical of this cable because this is the same kind of plug that you would hook into a computer monitor or even a power brick or a computer. But on its input side, so this is going to hook up to your 12 volt battery. The reason that's a problem is you don't traditionally want to hook up a 12 volt source into a 110 input. Now, the H-Calorie is designed and operates as intended, but one thing I want to caution you of is if you have a cable like this that has a connection like this, never ever hook that into your H-Calorie diesel heater. So I've got everything set up perfectly, and one great thing about having this AC adapter is that I could easily plug this into a standard wall outlet and get this heater running. Most of these diesel heaters rely strictly on 12 volts. And while the AC inverter is downsizing that 120 volts to 12 volts, it is an excellent option for those of you that are not relying on those 12 volt car style deep cycle or lithium iron phosphate batteries. Now, just like your typical diesel heater, this thing is priming right now. It's starting to circulate some air, and once it gets set, it will start to push out quite a bit of air. And unfortunately, I forgot to capture the startup wattage, but using that AC inverter, it did start around 98 watts. It's slowly working its way down. I'm curious to see what the steady state wattage is on this maximum output. I do currently have the heater set on max, and these diesel heaters typically pull very little power when they're at their operating temperature and running essentially in steady state. And I don't know if it's because this is in a plastic and metal case, but the sound of the fuel pump is definitely not as loud as the sound of the fan blowing. This thing is currently set on maximum speed, and so it has a humming, almost like a small airplane engine, something like that. It's not something that would keep me up at night if I was sleeping close to it. However, it is quite a bit more sound than I'm used to for not using a heater, obviously. Something I'm also pleased with is the fact that there aren't any strange smells. When I first started up, it had that traditional first time you start up a heater smell of maybe burning dust or burning hair or something like that. But now that this thing has been running for several minutes, it actually does not sound bad at all. Whew. Something you really want to be careful about is if you do open the lid while the thing is running, it is possible, in my opinion, that the lid could capture a lot of that excess heat coming off of the exhaust and possibly deform this lid. So make sure if you're going to open this, especially to refuel it, you do it very quickly and you ensure that the lid does not lean on this exhaust, especially also if you have that exhaust angled upwards. Now I'm about 10 feet away from the heater and the sound is decently bearable at this distance, but I do have it on its maximum fan mode. So for just a few seconds, I'm going to turn it down just to see how loud it is on its lowest setting. I'm down to the lowest setting and I'm only pulling between 10 and 12 watts from the power station. 10 to 12 watts is about 20% more power than if I was strictly using the DC outlet. Keep in mind, if you are using an AC inverter, suppose you have a power station with like 1,000 watt hour battery, something like that, not only are you drawing that low 10 to 12 watts from the AC inverter, but the AC inverter will also have essentially an operating tax that will penalize you another 10 to 20%. So in reality, when you're using the AC inverter over just the straight DC conversion, then you're going to be burning an additional 4 to 5 watts, which over the course of 10 to 20 hours could burn an additional 200 or 300 watt hours. Now I know your eyes probably glazed over when I went over that, but the number one thing to keep in mind is DC power is much more efficient than AC power. But if you are attaching this to something where you're not worried about the watts or the amount of power you're drawing overall, such as a house outlet, then that's really not something you need to worry about. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you'll know that everything I do, I like to discuss the safety aspects of that project. And in this case, it's very important that if you are going to be in an enclosed area such as a tent, rooftop tent, a small camper, a vehicle camper, anything small and anything that's sealed with no airflow in general, that this exhaust goes outside of that vehicle or that small compartment. Those exhaust fumes generate a massive amount of carbon monoxide, and even as little as 30 or 40 minutes, you could find yourself falling asleep for the permanent nap. You definitely want to make sure that you don't do that. I'm about 5 feet away from the heater, and even on setting number 1, the heat here, and it is about 60 degrees out today, is essentially unbearable. And these little things generate quite a bit of heat. And so if you can get over the fact that they're also producing toxic fumes that you must make sure that you manage, then it's actually a really good and cheap alternative to getting electric heaters with massive batteries or generators to run them. These are so efficient because once you get past that initial spike of current required to warm up the glow plugs, then you're truly only powering the fuel pump, which now that I'm on the lowest setting, you can hear pretty clearly, and that fan. Fans don't really take a lot of power, and pumps, especially as small as this one, also don't use a lot of power. So I briefly highlighted this remote control earlier. It's got a very simple functionality. It's got plus and minus to raise or lower the power setting, which that'll essentially increase the fan and the flow rate of fuel into the heater, as well as an on and off switch. In addition to that, this thing did come pre-charged or with batteries in it. I'm gonna assume that it has AAA, probably 2 AAA batteries in it. However, this has 2 small Phillips head jeweler screws that I'm not about to remove today. And the last thing about the operation of this device that I want to go over is when you turn it off, don't disconnect the power until it's finished going through its rundown sequence. That will allow it to burn off any excess fuel that's in the combustion chamber and make sure that you have a soot-free environment for your next use. Well, folks, that's about all I have on this H-Calorie SS2 cheap diesel heater. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. My next diesel heater video is going to get away from these all-in-one setups that are already pre-built, and I'll get a little more in depth as I set up that next H-Calorie kit. And as always, stay safe, stay warm, and I'll see you in the next one.